Today is World Elephant Day, and on behalf of the Peace Parks Foundation, we wish you all a happy World Elephant Day. My name is Dr Katharina von Dürkheim, and I am collaborating with the Peace Parks Foundation on identifying and securing wildlife corridors in Transfrontier conservation areas. I head up a postgraduate research program called Wildlife Free to Roam at Stellenbosch University in South Africa, the aim of which is to understand how these vast landscapes are structured and how they support animal movement across the landscape. This is particularly important with elephants. If you have followed the global press, you would have seen the marvelous story of a herd of elephants in China that underwent a 500-kilometer epic journey and were accompanied on this journey by 8 people, drones, and even government got involved, making space for these elephants to assure their safe return to their reserve of origin. Even in southern Africa, we had a similar story where we had 11 bulls that moved from southern Mozambique to Eswatini or Swaziland and back into the Kruger National Park. Now, these movements are not without danger, and Peace Parks, in their long history of TFCA development, is now looking on how to link protected areas through wildlife corridors. Now, in the case of the Kavango Zambezi TFCA, the objective is to facilitate the development of a network of protected areas that are connected by wildlife corridors for the persistence of wide-ranging and migratory species. The Khaza is home to 220,000 elephants, which is 50% of the African population, and many of us have enjoyed watching these wonderful animals in the national parks of Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Angola. And if we were really lucky, we saw large herds crossing roads. Now, what some of us don't realize is that elephants can move over vast areas, and they do so in the search of mating opportunities, food, and water. And their movements are, of course, also driven by rainfall, fire, human disturbance, and then also the density and abundance of other elephants in the area. Now, this is important in terms of connectivity because as, for example, the climate changes, elephants will have to adapt their ranges in their search for mating opportunities and specifically food and water, and also in terms of maintaining population health and maintaining genetic connectivity among isolated populations. Peace Parks Foundation focuses in areas such as the Kavango Wildlife Dispersal Area and the Zambezi Chobe Wildlife Dispersal Area in the Khaza TFCA. And research has already shown that elephants move along pathways that link the Lengwe Luiana in Angola to Sioma Ngwezi and Kafue in Zambia, and to the Babwata and Mudumu areas and Kwando in Namibia, and then down south into Botswana. And these corridors at a smaller scale connect things like crossing points on roads and rivers, forest reserves, fruiting trees, water pans, and at a much larger transboundary scale, they connect core areas along riparian zones as these elephants are looking for mating opportunities and forage. Now, what some of us don't realize perhaps is that males and females use the landscape quite differently. So the bulls are quite risk tolerant and they will move across human-dominated areas at night and at speed, traversing large areas, in some cases moving across 4 countries, whereas the females, due to the presence of their little calves, prefer the safety of protected areas and national parks and always stay quite close to water. Now, as elephants move through human areas where rural settlements have sprung up and planted crops near rivers, they traverse crop fields, and this results in crop damage, and in some cases bulls will target the tasty morsels that is ripe maize or millet and decimate an entire field. And this is, of course, a severe threat to the food security of the rural communities, and if not addressed, will not garner their support for any conservation initiatives. So this has to be addressed in spatial land use planning for wide-ranging wildlife. Now, it is clear, therefore, that humans and elephants compete for resources such as space and water. And it is therefore an objective of the Peace Parks Foundation to understand how the elephants are using the landscape in the Khaza TFCA And we are doing this by deploying satellite collars and boots on the ground to identify core focal areas and to start understanding which of these core focal areas, for example, water pans and woodlands, are important for access for elephants and other wildlife to maintain their persistence in a transfrontier context. It also allows us to understand how barriers like fences impact elephant movement. And also another threat, of course, is extremely high settlement densities, which are also function as a barrier to elephant movement. It allows peace parks to focus their interventions on human-elephant conflict hotspots, and that also includes the mapping of the micro corridors and securing those where they occur along large-scale movement routes. It's also very beneficial because from the data we can then see where the human-elephant conflict hotspots are and identify the communities that suffer the most from human-elephant conflict or human-wildlife conflict, because often these corridors are also used by other wildlife, such as predators. And that would allow us then to secure the corridors and protect them, but then also leverage the corridors to attract nature-based solutions and bioeconomy initiatives into the area to support and improve rural livelihoods. At the end of the day, what is most important is that the discussion around corridors makes its way into national policy and legislation so that spatial land use plans at a national level can ensure that wide-ranging species such as elephants and other wildlife can continue to survive in these transfrontier conservation areas. We look forward to updating you on our results next year.